So this is the podcast guesting workshop, and I'm really excited because I have found a new way to look at podcast guesting that is really, really exciting. And so that's really the intention that I'm setting to share with you all. This is going to be really, really effective. And I can speak from a place of knowing because I've put it to the test. Anybody that's been in my community will tell you that anything that I put out, it's because I've personally done it. I've personally done it. I've proven it. I've jumped on the landmines in order to make sure that my community doesn't have to. So thank you first and foremost for being here. These type of workshops, if you had the opportunity in Webinar Jam to hit the little button for any time a workshop comes through, my goal and intention for 23 is to have a workshop every single month where it's value added, value based, and really sharing, really to help you along your journey of entrepreneurship. So thank you for being here. I really appreciate y'all. Okay, so I am going to be sharing my screen. Guest podcasting made easy. Okay, so thank you again for being here. Super appreciated. For those of you that don't know me, I am Patty Dominguez. I love being an entrepreneur. I've been doing this now for almost a decade. January 6th, I worked one day in my corporate cushy job. And the reason I only worked one day is because I wanted to get my big fat bonus and I went into entrepreneurship. So it's almost 10 years. It'll be 10 years in January. And it has been the greatest, most rewarding journey of my entire life. And I'm very, very passionate about entrepreneurship because I really believe it allows people to craft their own journey. They get to decide what they want to do. I get to wake up in the morning when I want to wake up. And after working in corporate for 18 years, let me tell you, there's nothing better than being able to sleep until you're done sleeping instead of being awakened by an alarm clock, which is such a nightmare. So especially if you're not a morning person like I am. Cannot emphasize enough how much of a fan of entrepreneurship I am. So that is why I do these things, because I want to share with you all how powerful this can be when you can replace your corporate income. I've more than done that. I'm blessed to have a great business, and I want other people to succeed as well. Why? Because your message matters. There is a belief system that you have, and this entrepreneurship journey is something that has come through you, that you have this idea that you want to share. Your message matters. I say this in my emails. If you read my emails, you'll see my emails. I talk about this a lot. Whatever it is, whatever that nudge is that you have that you want to share, you have to share it. You have to. And so I believe that to be true. And so your message matters. I want you to know that. And so that's why I do what I do. Okay. So when I talk about your message mattering, the one thing that was really a poignant moment was a client of mine, a one-on-one client of mine. She said, Patty, I love what you do. I love what you have. And she's like, but more people should know you. And I'm like, you know what? It really left me thinking. And I put my ego aside and I just said, you know what? You're right. So I'm looking more so than ever to broadcast my message. And so a lot of the things that I'm going to be sharing are around traffic generation, around how do you broadcast your message, because it's not about how good you are. You could be the best in the world, but if not enough people know you, well, then there you go. Not a whole lot is happening in your business. It's time to stretch beyond what you're doing, getting out of your comfort zone. And truly, if not enough people know, if not enough people have heard of your message, it's really a disservice. Because how many times have you looked at other people that are doing what you're doing and you're like, really? That guy or that woman? Are you kidding me? I know so much more, or I have so much more to give. Well, again, if not enough people know about you, well, there you go. Not a whole lot is happening. Allow this to serve you as like a nudge to say, all right, it is time to broadcast my message. And so again, a lot of the strategies that I'm going to be sharing are specifically about that. Broadcasting your message is what we're talking about. Now, why podcasting? I am a big fan of podcasting. In fact, there's a mentor of mine that many of you on this call knows, and he's really bullish on podcasting because that's his primary vehicle. Okay. So podcasting is really great. For me, it was a matter of like, hey, I can jump on in my sweats and do my own podcast, do a solo show. But there's so much more to that I've come to figure out through this process, right? I wasn't doing it as strategically as I could. Now, I know I speak from a place of knowing that I'm very versed at podcasting. I've had 3 podcasts and you're looking at over 400 episodes collectively. Now, podcasting, as you may or may not already know, there's over 1 million podcast RSS feeds, over 1 million podcasts. Okay, lots of traffic. And so I clipped this from online, and I'll post the source if anyone's interested. I apologize. It clipped the 5 most popular podcast genres. Business, health are the really big ones. So there's a high probability if you're in entrepreneurship, you're in one of the money-making arenas, such as health and wellness, such as business or the relationship market. I believe there's another market, which is the 4th market that is profitable, and that is the passion market, meaning people that are super passionate about any given thing, such as, I don't know, woodworking, or they're passionate about their dogs or golf or tennis. So there's podcasts on all these categories, so there's plenty of opportunity for you to make your mark in the podcasting world. Education wise, what's really compelling also is that people who listen to podcasts are more highly educated. So say, for example, you are a coach or service provider, you're an entrepreneur that has a high ticket offering. This is why podcasting for people to find you works really well. It correlates to higher educated people, probably have more discretionary income, probably would be more interested potentially in your high ticket offer, especially if you are in the right niche, right? You have a good message to market match. This is what I talk about from a positioning standpoint, the importance of that. Now, these are for the people that have podcasts. So one of the things that podcast has a big money-making opportunity beyond, of course, the Tim Ferriss show or Joe Rogan, who are making a pretty penny in this arena. There are people that are making income when it comes to somebody sponsoring on your podcast, etc. So it does come with a money-making opportunity. However, if you are thinking to yourself, okay, well, this is about launching a podcast, I have to tell you that launching a podcast, as you may already know, is a whole lot of work. It's a lot of work, and you have to have that production schedule. You have to have editors. You have to have somebody posting your podcast and the show notes and the links, and then posting it on Anchor or wherever it is your broadcasting tool is. So there's a lot of steps to this. And so one of the things that I think is really exciting is that if you've ever thought about podcasting, but you don't want to commit to having a podcast, because again, when you have a podcast, most people say, okay, let me start a podcast. They may do 20 episodes and it kind of falls by the wayside. And the important thing about podcasting as a podcaster is you want to have that consistency of shows, because the cumulative amount of shows that you have and the amount of shows that people listen to, right? The more shows you have, the more probability that more people will listen, the higher your numbers and downloads, etc. Okay, so right, it's a slow climb to have a podcast in order for it to have its true mark. But I think the big opportunity is being a guest on podcast, being a guest. And if you've ever thought about podcasting, but you're like, yeah, I don't want to commit to a podcast, that's a whole lot of work. Or maybe you've tried and then you're thinking, okay, I don't know if I can continue doing this, versus being a guest on a podcast has huge amount of potential. And this is what we're talking about here. Okay. Number one reason why podcasts are so great is that it is really great for authority building and brand building. And what I mean by that is, if you've ever been on a podcast, and I say this to my clients all the time, understand that you being on a podcast, just even one podcast, gives you the ability to say that you've been on Audible, that you've been on Amazon, Google Play, iTunes, Stitcher, all of the on Spotify, all of these audio platforms. That lends itself to social proof. So use that social proof. Use that social proof on your website, on your landing pages, anywhere that you can project that you're an authority, right? So it really helps with that authority and brand building. Really important. So if you haven't done it, I always say, because people are like, oh, I don't have enough social proof. I'm like, literally get on one podcast. That'll help you, because it goes out to so many different platforms. You can say in integrity, I've been on these platforms. So that's super helpful. And if you haven't done it, that's a super easy tip to do. Just get on a podcast. The other one is it's great for syndicating your message. And what I mean by that is, when you are a podcast guest, you're basically leveraging other people's audiences. So the guests that I've had on my show, I'm the one that's curated the audience. They get to show up. They get to highlight their expertise. Of course, they're adding value, But then that message could be syndicated across the different platforms that I have, because I, as a podcaster, am promoting my podcast on YouTube, LinkedIn, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, Pinterest, all the social media channels. And again, the only thing that you have to do is show up for the interview. So it's massively rewarding in that sense. And the other side of it, and this is a really important tip, is it's great for SEO. This is a very important tip. And the one thing I want you to take away with this is the thing where I'm like, I'm missing out. I have to get into podcast guesting. This is my big tip, is that if you are on somebody's podcast, make sure that that podcaster has a show notes page, meaning that they have a website where they are promoting their podcast. The reason is because when somebody has a show notes page, they have the episode, they have the audio embedded, but then they can put your links on there. They are putting your links to your website, your freebie, your social media handles on the website. So that is really great for backlinking, because most people think I'm not going to get on the bigger podcast. And sure, there's those big podcasts like Joe Rogan and Tim Ferriss, and wow, imagine the effect of being on one of those podcasts. So for a while, I was dismissing the smaller podcasts because I was like, well, I don't know, do they have enough reach, etc. And so what I really came to understand is that the big opportunity is on having those backlinks. So imagine doing all of these shows with backlinks, with their show notes page where your link is highlighted. You can generate leads organically that way. So I think that is one of the biggest opportunities that people don't really understand when they're searching to be on somebody's podcast. Do the work to look to see if that podcaster has actually a podcast page, right? Are they putting your backlink on their website? Because that's going to help you for backlinks. And that's what I look for when I'm looking to get on somebody's podcast. So it's really helpful. And you'd be surprised, leads come in automatically because, again, that podcaster's audience, they're going to be looking for content. And then I've had it where people are like, oh, I really like your show. I'm like, what show are you talking about? How did you find me? And then they'll tell me, I'm like, wow, I did that podcast 2 years ago. And you bring them into my world. So for those of you that are looking for more reach, understand, again, this isn't like the silver bullet, so to speak, but this is a way to plant the seeds so that more people find out about you over time. And it's really cool if you do it strategically. So let me keep going. And the other side of it is the tremendous amount of collaboration potential. In my community, people have heard the concepts of strategic partnerships. I'm really big on that. Initially, when I quit my corporate job, I relied, solely on strategic partnerships, collaborations. Who already has the audience that you want to tap into? So one of the best things that you can do is, as a podcast, there's a method to this, is around saying, okay, how do you add value to that person, but then continue the conversation? As a matter of fact, I will say that one of the best connections I recently made was with somebody whose podcast that I was on. And I took the time to listen to his podcast. I listened to a couple of episodes. I knew the cadence. I knew the style in which or how he interviews. So I showed up to the podcast totally prepared. And then he reached out to me and was like, I love what you're saying. Would love to have you be on my show. I'm like, that's awesome. So I went on the show. And then afterwards, what was really great, I said to him, hey, what can I do for you? How can I support you? He's like, we started having a conversation. And so that conversation, I gave him a couple of tips. And then just naturally, the reciprocity was there. And so he said to me, he's like, hey, tell me a little bit more about you, what you're doing. He's like, I like what you're doing. And he's like, I'd love to introduce you to a strategic partner of mine. And he said, he's in Europe and he has this group and would love to connect you. And so he made a connection. Now that connection is going to lead to a joint venture opportunity for me, just from podcasting, from me being a guest on a podcast. I cannot emphasize how powerful this is when you think about strategic partnerships and collaborations. This is the reason that back in 2013, I was able to completely move into a space of profitability in my business, going from a multiple six-figure salary in my corporate job into entrepreneurship. and making it happen. It wasn't because I had a huge traffic, the budget that I had in traffic. No, I actually didn't do any of those typical routes where people are like, let me do Facebook ads, let me do Instagram ads. I didn't do any of that. I relied growing my business on strategic partnerships. And to this day, I still have clients as a result of those partnerships that I had early on. Highly recommend. There's so many opportunities beyond the show. Like I mentioned, that introduction to his friend Alliance, he's talking to me now. We have that joint venture. And so I plan on doing a lot more of that. Just watch, you'll see. So I once upon a time came up with a course called Podcast Guest Pro, how to find a podcast to be on. The entire process I had for a while is I had a podcast VA, and this course you can literally give to your podcast VA, any VA, have them go through the course and they know exactly what to do to get you on podcast. It's a really, it's 100%. It works. Many of my clients have done it. Many of my clients have used it. Okay. So it definitely works. Now, the interesting thing about this is that somebody told me about this tool that I am now going to show you that literally puts the kibosh on this product. This product still works if you wanted to go this route, but this is why I'm excited and why I wanted to do this workshop, because I feel like I have to share this, is this tool. It's called Podmatch. You guys, when I tell you that this has been massive, I'm not even exaggerating. It's been so cool. And so Podmatch, what it does is like it has this AI. And if you're looking to be a guest on podcasts, or you have a podcast and you're looking to host. So you basically put together your bio on Podmatch, and I add a little bit about me. I add in all my links here, my website, all my socials. I mentioned that I also have a podcast. You put in your bio, you put in keywords. Lots of people don't include a video, which I think is a missed opportunity. So I created a video for this so that people can hear me, see how I talk, because a lot of people are getting savvy and they're actually utilizing the video side of podcasting. I'm starting to do that too. What I mean is that when you have a podcast and you record it via Zoom or on video, you can take that video, chunk it up into different pieces, and then put it on social. So it's a really great way to leverage that content. And so one of the cool things about this Podmatch is that you can add a video here like you see, and then adding in your tags, so what you want to be known for, or those keywords that you want to be known for, and then you can go into your biography. This is cool, is that you get to decide what are the titles that you would use for what you speak about. So some titles so that you can be found. And so I have all of those things, questions that people can ask. So if you're a podcaster and you bring somebody on who is on Podmatch, you already have everything from them. So it keeps it really simple. But then the other side of it is that you already have questions that you can ask them. So that can make the interview super dynamic. As you can see, it also here in the lower left-hand side, you can include your call to action. Anytime you're doing that, you must have a call to action. You must have that thing that you're inviting them to. The benefit of that is that you're building your email list. I won't even get on my soapbox about that one because I'm super on my soapbox about that topic because it's so important, right? It's so important to build your email list. So here, for example, on the left-hand side where my arrow is, and you can see that, these are all people who want to be on the show, or I have two different views as a host and also as a guest. So you can see here, there's upcoming interviews. I have 14 unscheduled interviews. I have 4 that are upcoming that you can see here, both guesting and hosting, which is really great. 3 of them have been completed this month. And so there it goes. And so they gamify things by having training on how to utilize the tool because, of course, tool adoption could be a bit of an obstacle and a hurdle. But this thing has been so massive. And the cool thing about it also is that every single, I believe it's 10 hours, you get matches. So I don't even have to hunt for any podcast per se, because this is telling me based on my keywords and based on the things that I want to be on interviews, I get to see. So I get to scope them out and say, okay, what is this person about? Are they in the same arena? Are they the right audience, right? So for example, for me, if it was a men only audience, it wouldn't work for me because I work primarily with women. just as an example. So it kind of goes into all these different things and say, if I'm not interested in this person, I can pass. If I say, okay, well, let me put them on the back burner, or if I want to send them a message. And the great thing about that is that you can send them a message to pitch that you want to be on the show. They get to look at your profile and see any reviews that you've had, some samples of podcasts that you've been on. Point in saying that it's all here within this tool comprehensively, everything that you need. This completely took over the need for somebody to get my course. If they don't want to pay the monthly on something like this, it's just so great. It has everything you need. So that's the overview that I wanted to share. So this workshop, I wanted to make it short and punchy and to the point. If you're interested in Podmatch, again, highly recommend. That strategic partner that I was able to get came out of a Podmatch show where he reached out to me. I have another woman who I'm doing a collaboration. She's like, I'm doing a webinar, could really use somebody to speak on what you talk about. I was on her show. And then another woman, she said, hey, do you do podcast swaps, right? Because I have a podcast, she has a podcast, so we're going to swap. And then the cool thing about it is that people are really utilizing this podcasting platform strategically. And I can tell you, I've been on it for now almost a month, and it's been massively rewarding. As you can see, I have 14 shows in the hopper that I have to schedule. I've had people reach out to me, and I'm really excited because of the strategic partnership opportunity. Because once somebody sees you live and in person, they can see more about you. You can see like, hey, how can I help you? How can you help me? So this is going to be one of my vehicles for networking. Certainly has already started well into 23. Now, you could join Podmatch on your own if you wanted. The price is super affordable. I have the premium version. And the reason I have the premium version is that as a podcast host, when somebody is on my podcast, they have to sign a waiver that I can use the video and audio in any which way I please. And that's really important to me because I love to repurpose my content. Also with premium, which I think is like $50 a month, you also get top placement dashboard find you. So I think a lot of the reason why I've been found more so is because I have premium placement. So to me, that's well worth it. So if you're interested in joining Podmatch, I am not the owner of Podmatch. I wish I was because this is so genius. But if you go to joinpodmatch.com/Patty and you use my link, and I can tell if you do because we can see it on the back end of my portal on Podmatch. But if you use my link, I will gift you my Podcast Pro bio template. So I do have a podcast bio template with all of the key things that you need to show up like a pro. You'll also get my video script. So for example, like I mentioned, most people don't have a video with their profile. You definitely want to have a video. Why? So people could see you, so you have the opportunity to connect, but you have to do it in a way that's engaging, influential, and persuasive. So I will give you my influential video script as well as a module, because this is one of the things that I'm very passionate about, is how can you leverage that podcast show for more exposure. So just because you went on somebody's podcast show, it doesn't stop when they launch a show. There's ways that you can repurpose it. For example, the podcast that I was on, that I recorded just on Monday, I said, hey, do you mind if I get the video? Because I'd love to put it on mine and chop and slice and dice, put on social. I will tag you. I'll give you shout outs. The podcaster was like, hell yeah, of course. So these are ways that you can start to make more of a presence, like an omnipresence, when you take advantage of those assets. So I'll share a little bit more about that on the podcast and how to leverage the show for more exposure. All you have to do is, if you use my link, joinpodmatch.com/Patty, is send an email to support. My integrator will cross-check that and we'll send you the Podcast Pro bio template, influential video script, as well as a module for my podcast product with the tips on how to leverage a show. So excited about Podmatch. It's been hugely rewarding. And I can say, comparatively speaking, I was paying my podcast VA, I think it was totally part-time, but I was paying about $75 a week. So think about it this way, that I was willing to spend $300 a month. And for $50 a month, I'm getting so much more, many more podcasts to be on. But it also builds everything together. Like, there's so much of the way that they created this product that's been so savvy. I really, really recommend it because I wanted to get right to the content and show you the opportunity that you have with something like utilizing podcast guesting to broadcast your message and your brand. I am super excited to share this with you because I thought this was such a great find so far. So I was only going to present this to my community. I was like, I have to tell more people, this is such a great tool. It's been on my radar to finally be a guest. Timing is perfect. Great, Jess. You really should. Honestly, it's been awesome. And utilizing it and really having the understanding that you're on somebody's show, it's the start of a potential collaboration. It's the start of the relationship. It's a start better than networking in a way, because when you're networking, you're like, okay, let me get your card. Then you go away and then time passes versus like you have somebody on the show and then you're like, oh, tell me about you. That's it. Like, how can I support you? That was the question that is the question that I always use when the show stops. How can I support you? What are you struggling with right now? Or what are you really challenged with, in your business? And again, just by the law of reciprocity, by you asking that question, the person on the receiving end most likely will say, well, how can I help you? It's just natural. And so the other side of this is that, again, if you can ask for the podcast recording file, most of these creators will say yes. And the reason is you want to make it worth their while. You'll say, let me take this, I'm going to broadcast it out. I'm going to put it on TikTok and Instagram, whatever you decide to do. That way you can say, and then of course, I will tag you, I'll shout you out, this and that. Again, you want to make it because people are only interested, what's in it for me, right? So you want to make sure that you're addressing that. Amanda says, how do you decide what questions to ask your guest? So, for example, in Podmatch, like I had showed you, I have a list of 8 questions that are readily available on my profile that somebody can ask me. So, for example, I was on somebody's podcast. She pulled up my bio. She literally asked maybe 4 of those questions. So it even makes you as a podcaster have an easy way out because you're like, okay, these are the questions that I can ask that I know that my guest is an expert on and they're going to feel really comfortable. So again, as a podcaster, super convenient because you get all that stuff, but you get the titles, right? It gives you ideas for podcast titles. It gives you ideas for questions to ask. So I have those for mine. You as a guest, think about those questions that you'd want to be asked, the questions that you know that you can knock it out of the park that would make it really easy for you to answer. So that's all in the profile when you set up your Podmatch, which is really nice. So again, if you have any additional questions, feel free to reach out. Awesome if someone doesn't know your subject matter. Absolutely. Exactly, Rosemary. For you, this would be excellent. And yeah, it's just leveraging your expertise and your authority and utilizing podcast to broadcast your message, getting your message out there, being strategic around how you are getting on shows. Remember to find those shows that have the show notes page so that your backlink is there. That's going to help you so that you're always bringing leads into your world. So I'll get off my soapbox. Make sure to build your email list. Don't ever forget that. If there's no other questions, thank you so much for being here. Appreciate you all. Feel free to reach out. And again, in addition to the bonuses that you see here, I'll also include the email template or the messaging template that you can use to reach out to them. So it makes it very turnkey and systematized and easy. We like easy. All right, everybody. Thank you again. Appreciate you all. Have an awesome